Next, we're going to be hearing about 6 online campaigns, each of which use an innovative approach to meet a fundraising, advocacy, or community building challenge, and they were successful in that as well. So if I can invite our 6 case study presenters onto the stage as they're making their way up, I'll just tell you a little bit about them. We're going to be hearing from Michelle Keith, who's the marketing director at Malaria No More. She came from an advertising background with Bartle, Bogle and Hegarty, and while she was there, she introduced the practice of corporate social responsibility into the firm. She's going to be our first presenter. She's going to talk to us about Twitternet's and Ashton Kutcher. So, Michelle, take it away.
I believe this is my clicker. Good morning. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Really honored to be part of this panel. What we're going to do today is do a really quick snapshot of how we've leveraged some social media momentum in the past to build some real impact for our cause. I'm assuming a lot of you know about malaria, but I'm not going to assume that everybody does. So we're going to start with some hard-hitting stats. Bill Gates said it best: malaria is the worst thing on the planet. It's one of the top 3 child killers in the world. 655,000 malaria deaths were estimated in 2010. It's a huge economic burden on the continent of Africa, one of the leading reasons for absenteeism in schools. But the good news is malaria is preventable and treatable. We have the tools to combat this disease. We have mosquito nets. We have malaria treatment. And in the last just 6 years, we've seen a 33% decline in malaria deaths. But we're not done yet. A child still dies from malaria every minute, so our marketing challenge becomes, how do we bridge this gap of this tremendous and urgent issue with the American public who hasn't thought about malaria since the 1950s? And in 2009, this manifested itself in a campaign with Ashton Kutcher. And so this was a partnership with Ashton Kutcher and a group called Catalyst. Ashton had just heard about this thing called Twitter, and he was very quickly amassing a big social media following and had committed to donating $100,000 to Malaria No More if he could beat CNN to the first 1 million followers. And it was a tremendous opportunity for us. Catalyst was smart enough to come up with a hashtag, a rallying cry called End Malaria. And this was part of all the communications that Ashton put out. And he invited all of his friends and the American public to join in with him. And as a result, we were able to raise $480,000, enough to buy about 138,000 mosquito nets that were then distributed to a region called Vélingara in Senegal, which was a hugely malaria endemic community. And what was really exciting about this is that we had the opportunity to spread the word beyond Twitter. There was opportunity for PR. And what we really liked about the Twitter platform is that we were able to report back and tell a deeper story and really show who the beneficiaries were from these individual donations that came in. And you'll see here, we have some beautiful shots of the beneficiaries themselves. These are healthy children who received malaria nets, mosquito nets rather, because of individual contributions. And so we saw this campaign as being a big success for a couple of reasons, and I'll talk about 3 of them. One, we really felt that there was this huge partnership collaboration from celebrity to media to the on-the-ground partners. 2, there was just a willingness from our organizational leadership to actually try this Twitter thing. It was a bit of an uncharted territory, and we dove in deep with Ashton Kutcher, who, you know, is awesome. And then 3, it was just an institutional commitment to make this more than just a moment. It was about building a narrative, reporting back, and showing how individual contributions really did make a difference. And so this End Malaria hashtag that was created has manifested itself in a couple different ways over the last couple of years. And I'm going to fast forward us to just this past April, World Malaria Day. Again, we brought End Malaria back to say, take a minute to end malaria. Again, a child dies from malaria every minute. And we wanted to tell that story in a really big way across a lot of different platforms for World Malaria Day. And through a partnership with a group called Backplane, along with the UN Special Envoy for Malaria, we distributed this online video that highlighted key malaria stats, some of which I shared earlier today. Some of the major contributors, Global Fund, I think you're in the room, World Bank, and some of those success measures, but also saying this is a minute that you're watching a video and a child will be a victim to this disease. So we need you to take action. We need you to share this video with your friends. We need you to sign up to be a broader part of the story. We want you to donate a $10 mosquito net. And again, thanks to partnership, we had some really broad reach for this campaign. We have some hopefully not too obnoxious, screenshots here. Coverage on NASDAQ, Yahoo stepped in, AOL, our friends at One Campaign. And then, you know, if you're a believer, we certainly were after this. Justin Bieber was willing to do one single tweet, and we saw 13,000 of his followers tell their friends about it, which is incredible. Ashton Kutcher came back to help us. Our friend Bill Gates, and I love transitioning from Bill Gates to, of course, 50 Cent. And so as we look at this campaign, we saw big awareness, big reach. We're quite proud of some of our Twitter numbers. I think over 130 million Twitter impressions. The video itself had about 60,000 views. But as we stepped back and did some post-campaign analysis, we said, do these numbers really stack up? What do these impressions mean? And the answer was, we need more than retweets, and we really need more than video views. And so we took it upon ourselves to think about, what does meaningful action look like on social media? And for us, that's really an action that ties directly to saving a life. And here's an example, is making a small donation for life-saving malaria treatment. And so you'll see over the course of the next couple of months, our organization is really going to be focused on these meaningful actions. We like big, sexy awareness numbers, but we want true impact. And so that's kind of the challenge that we throw out, and it's already been set up today, is what does meaningful action look like for your organization, and how will you change and adapt your social media strategies to deliver on that definition? That's it.
Thank you very much. So our next speaker is going to be Guy Kirkpatrick. He is the UK Operations Coordinator for Global Poverty Project. And Guy is going to present a case study about their Live Below the Line campaign, which challenged people to think about poverty in a different way by asking them, could you live on $1.25 a day? So over to Guy.
So, perfect introduction. So I'm not going to assume all of you know Live Below the Line. I know two of the panelists here represent our partner organisations, so I hope you both took part in it. Good, good, good. So to give you a brief overview of what it's about, the challenge is to spend 5 days feeding yourself on your local purchasing power parity adjusted equivalent to the World Bank's $1.25 extreme poverty line. So here in the US, that's $1.50, having adjusted for inflation since 2005 setting of this mark. And the reason we give is to give a glimpse. I know you're not going to understand it from doing this, you're not going to feel the effects, but you'll get a glimpse into the lives of those 1.3 billion people who do this every day, and who have to make that money last for a whole lot more than just food and drink. So, where did the campaign come from? It comes from our Australian country director, or who was our Australian country director. He was giving our keynote speech, 1.4 billion reasons, which is designed to catalyse the movement to end extreme poverty, to engage people and really get them to think about the problems and the issues and how they can be a part of bringing an end to extreme poverty. He had given this presentation 50 times in 50 days by doing a tour across Australia. He came back from that and got this feeling of, okay, I spend all day, every day talking about this, but I've never really felt it. I can't quite connect to it. So he challenged himself to live on this $1.25, on the $1.25 figure. He did it crazily for a month and found, just by doing it himself, blogging about it, he didn't do it for sponsorship or anything, but he found people coming up to him, asking him, talking. People who had never seen these things were starting to engage with it. He got a massive Twitter following. Our blog readership skyrocketed, and people started offering him money. So we thought, okay, how do we make this something that can help the sector? We trialled it as a fundraising campaign with an organisation called the Oak Tree Foundation in Australia in 2010, and massive reaction. Even their national news just picked up. That was without any media spend at all. We then launched it internationally in 2011 and did it again in May 2012. The objectives, deepen public engagement and understanding, inspire thousands to raise awareness, build movement, and of course there's the standard raise money, recruit thousands, educate people. It's How did we do that? When in 2011 we used an out-of-the-box website that, okay, it was built for fundraising, but it wasn't built for the social nature of this, which is we get people to talk to each other about these issues. That is the key factor here. So we took the plunge. This year we built a completely custom-built website. Major spend, and it paid off. We asked, what are the things people are interested in? Okay, they're interested in community. They want to talk to each other about it. They're interested in leaderboards because, let's be honest, however altruistic we are, we like being more altruistic than other people. And we like to share pictures of the fact that we're more altruistic than other people. So we listened to this feedback and we built our own custom-built website. And together with 38 charities around the world, $3 million was raised by 15,500 people in 79 countries, including some of the most bizarre places like Bosnia. We had some people in Zimbabwe doing it, South Africa, and of course our core countries. 45,000 donors, CNN, BBC, and the celebrity element. We had absolutely massive payoff from this one thing. On our lowest metric, we saw a 100% increase. So we saw leaderboards, 36,000 tweets from 15,000 people, reaching 10.1 million people. I know that will seem like, okay, your Twitter reached 10.1 million people, everyone says that, but it's that exposure of 55 million people. That's 5 tweets per person that saw us on average. They're all starting to engage with those issues. We had 1 million visitors to the site, consuming nearly 4 million pages. 41,900 hours were spent on the campaign website. That's a new metric that we're trialing, is that we have this length of time to engage with people on our website. And we started asking ourselves, okay, how do we design the website to say 41,000 hours a day? How do we make the most of those 41,000 hours? So we started to profile the blogs people wrote. 7,600 blogs were written during the course of the campaign. It's staggering how much people started talking about these. There are over 400,000 direct conversations. This is from our post surveys. This is one of our star pieces. It reaches those people who haven't traditionally engaged, because this is a fundamentally new thing. If you stood in the office eating a carrot whilst everyone else is preparing their meals, you're going to talk about why are you eating a carrot. And it gets people to engage with it. So nearly over 3/4 of the people who engaged with the US campaign had never done anything to do with charity. Over half the people in the UK had never done anything with these charities. It engaged them after it. We asked them, what did you do? Obviously, waste less food. It's a food campaign. But across the spectrum of actions, people were doing more. One of the big ones, they were talking to more people. It's how we inspire that action and get that social thing. They were talking online, they were talking offline. How do we make it bigger? It's always a question. Next year, we're going to be expanding into Canada. We're going to be tapping into all of those other things. So we've got Global Citizen platform now. We've got hundreds of people on there that are starting to engage with these issues through the Global Citizen Festival, which I'm told in this time zone was 3 days ago. You have to forgive me, I'm floating between 4 different time zones at the minute. So those of you who might have seen it, massive advocacy concert event that happened in New York Central Park. How do we get those people into doing Live Below the Line and into that global sphere? So that's what's exciting and going to happen in 2013. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Guy. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Adriana Logalbo, who works for GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. She's leading their first global campaign to galvanize a community of support aimed at improving education and nutrition among mothers and young children. Previously, Adriana worked at the UN Foundation. She led the Nothing But Nets anti-malaria campaign. And she's going to talk to us about GAIN's Future Fortified campaign. Here you go. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So it's a pleasure to be here. We are a brand new campaign, which is, I think, perhaps why we've been asked to provide a case study of what we're doing. And so bear with me as I give you a second on what Future Fortified is all about, and then we'll dive into what we've been doing. So very simply, we are trying to address what is one of the world's largest global health issues. While malnutrition is relatively hidden from most people, it's still affecting 2 billion people around the world every single day. And what we're looking at is the fact that up until this point, nutrition has remained, quite frankly, flatlined with respect to global funding for nutrition. While funding for health overall has gone up in an unprecedented fashion, over the last 10 to 15 years, we haven't seen the same for nutrition. And it's our premise that a huge piece of this is because nutrition has not, up to this point, had a dedicated advocacy community. It hasn't had a base of supporters that have really driven this issue to the forefront, whether it's from a political or public perspective. There's a lot of examples of organizations and communities that have been able to do this. Global HIV/AIDS, malaria, and the work that's happening. Obviously, polio is a great one. We won't dive into those, obviously, now in the sake of time. But we believe that we are in this unique moment for nutrition because we do have new research that has come out in recent years. We have new global champions like Secretary Clinton, and there are new innovations in the space which are making it possible to increase or improve nutrition globally in these very cost-effective ways. So our question is, how do we take those moments and start to build momentum and ultimately a long-term movement for nutrition, very much in the way that Malaria No More and the UN Foundation and Nothing But Nets, along with many others, have been able to do for malaria. So, enter Future Fortified. We are a brand new campaign we have just launched this year, and our effort is to really raise awareness and ultimately improve access to good nutrition for women and children around the world, particularly focused on that very critical 1,000-day period that many of you have perhaps heard of at this point, the time between pregnancy and 2 years of age, where we know good nutrition is critical to get children off to the right start in life. And we also know, conversely, poor nutrition actually leads to physical and mental development challenges, which unfortunately cannot be reversed after 2 years. But at the end of the day, we need a community around this issue. If nobody is talking about nutrition, or global nutrition in our case, then it doesn't matter how important this period of time is or how much investment we feel should go towards it. If there's no support, there will be no political support to increase investments in this area. And so we've created Future Fortified, and very early on, our goal was to, quite frankly, and it may not seem so strategic, just turn on as many levers as we possibly could in the very early days, because we were building a community from scratch. The strategic part of it is perhaps in how we did that. We realized in 2012, where we are today, as opposed to in 2005 and 2006 when we were launching malaria campaigns, that it's a very different world in which we live. And social media, for us, was actually the driving tactic as opposed to an add-on. Looking at social media as the way to actually reach our community and start to engage our community, as opposed to the way to just broadcast what we're doing. And so, to that end, our strategy has focused on things like authenticity and transparency and interaction. I'll break it down into 3 major categories. There's our work in reaching moms, so with respect to the audience conversation, our work in reaching influencers and starting to engage influencers to, quite frankly, help us reach our audience, and our work in engaging partners and how we're trying to bring them into the folds and oftentimes push them to do some new things that they've never done before as well. So with respect to moms, perhaps I know other people on the panel may be talking about this audience as well. It may be fair to say they're a relatively inundated audience, but it's for good reason. I mean, brands are reaching out to this audience because they do control 80% of the consumer household spending. And they also are very active online, and they're very much engaged. So for us, it was about how do we bring our issue to them where they are. And a couple of things we did was reaching out to bloggers, both small and large, trying to really get them to help us build this community in a way that was meaningful for them. And so we reached out to them, not just asking them to communicate and promote the issue and Future Fortified, but rather to give us a bit of content that we could then add value back to them. I think that's one thing that most people have recognized in this space is you have to be willing to add value and able to add value back to the communities that you're engaging. And so with the bloggers, we were able to, for instance, in this example, ask moms for their healthy, nutritious recipes, and then package those into sort of a feature, and then push it back to them and tag them. So they were willing to share their featured recipe with their network and bring people into the nutrition conversation and into the Future Fortified campaign. Another key strategy for us has been this engaging influencers. And the next slide will show sort of the more traditional celebrity influencers, but in this case, it's also those specific niche markets who are going to help you reach your audience. So this is an example. We worked with Dallas Clayton, who I don't know if anyone in this room knows, but if you're a new mom, particularly in the West Coast, you may know him because he's a dad in LA who wrote this awesome book that's conveniently called An Awesome Book. And he came to us, and he's very, with the young new moms in LA, he is everything, right? I mean, they love his book. So for us to be able to work with him, he came and asked us if he could bring Future Fortified on tour with him when he was going across the country with HarperCollins. We said, of course, we'd love it. So that was sort of the offline engagement, so to speak. And then he communicated out through his network. So we had this online engagement, and I'll spare you the 2-minute video, but what was really interesting was the intersection of the two. So being able to take content from his tour, package that into a really, quite frankly, authentic video coming from Dallas's voice that we could push back out to his community. It's something we just recently launched and have been gaining some good traction with, and we're looking forward to doing more activities like that. And then, of course, actually reaching out to the creative community, this form of influencer community. And the way we've tried to do this is when we have unique content for them to push out. So when we created a video for Future Fortified, we went to that community, asked the CAAs of the world, asked our friends and family to help us push it out. And this is where we saw incredible growth within our Twitter community in particular, was when sort of these creative influencers were able to recommend us to their networks, so to speak. The final piece and strategy that we've been employing so far has been working with our partners. So one example is with a company called Herbalife. They're based in LA, and they were interested in bringing Future Fortified to their soccer tournament this summer that they hosted, which, coming from nothing but nets, felt like old hat. We're going to go to stadiums, we're going to do in-stadium activations, we're going to have a video on a jumbotron, this is going to be great. But again, 2012, a bit different than when we were doing this several years ago. There's an opportunity to make that offline activation cross over with the online engagement. And so what we did was created a Twitter campaign. So we asked Herbalife to commit to donate $1 to every tweet with this specific hashtag that we were able to promote through their 9 various markets that they had games in that reached 300,000 people, and that was great. But we were also able to promote it online. And so that's where we saw, again, significant traction, particularly in this case on Facebook, where it was actually Herbalife doing the talking, but it was their community that was very interested in what they were doing and their partnership with Future Fortified. And going back to the partner and being able to say, look, your community is particularly proud of the work that you're doing with our organization, only helps to instill greater confidence in working with us moving forward and doing some of these creative tactics. So we are in this growth period for our campaign and for the community, and we've been thrilled that in 6 months' time we've been able to grow to nearly 35,000 people online, and that's been done very much organically through moms, through influencers, and through partnerships. So where are we going next? A couple things that I want to mention, because we are as much here to learn from everyone in this room as to provide a case study. We are really interested in finding very meaningful but innovative ways to advocate. So one of the things we tested this summer was working with a startup company called Tout. They have enabled people to record 15-second videos. It's kind of the video version of Twitter. And so we teamed up with Good to see if we could get our community and Good's community to send video messages to their members of Congress around the Farm Bill. This is something we want to expand on over the winter and as we get into our new Congress and our new administration, whichever way that goes. And we're excited to try this out and really looking forward to getting feedback from folks as we go. The next piece, and this goes to sort of the introductory comments, we are constantly trying to iterate in the work that we're doing. So we're now in sort of a new phase within our website of trying to build out this platform in a way that we actually can track what people are doing, not just so we know what people are doing, though that will be very helpful for us as we communicate, but also in a way that adds value to them, again, so they earn points as they take actions on our site. This is, and other people are doing this, sort of this gamification of the work, in a way that they can start to earn rewards as they move forward and earn points, going to the leaderboard conversation, or people being able to showcase what they're doing, whether it's on social or on a digital platform. And then finally, and also, following on Michelle's comments, we are now in a stage where we've built a community, but we really need to deepen that conversation, both offline and online. And so that is our big focus at this stage, is to have conversations around this very real, very personal issue of nutrition to keep people engaged over the long term. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate learning, or look forward to learning from all of you.
Thank you, Adriana. Very interesting. Okay, next we're going to hear from Wendy Harmon from, she's the Director of Social Strategy for the Red Cross. Red Cross or American Red Cross? American Red Cross. Responsible for the national social media presence, including their listening program, social content, and community engagement. And she's going to talk to us about how they use digital tools to mobilize disaster volunteers and also mobile fundraising. Thank you.
Hi. So I'm Wendy Harmon. I've been working at the American Red Cross doing social engagement for almost 6 years now, so a fairly long time. And I got to admit, for those first 4 years, we were pretty good at making community, right? Building, getting likes on Facebook, getting followers on Twitter, and doing some things that we were really proud of. But in the weeks before January 12th of 2010, I was moping around a little bit. Because we were good at that stuff, but I was starting to question, what does all this mean? Where are we going with this? Is it making any kind of an offline impact? And so it turns out that it was, or I was about to really realize the true power of social communities. This is our mission statement here, and you can see the mission of the American Red Cross is both quite mobile and quite social. So it makes sense that we would embrace these two different avenues and tools for engaging our communities. And just as a note, as an institution as big as the American Red Cross is and as big as many of your institutions are, we're really working on sort of tearing down some of those institutional walls, because we now live in a world where people can organize themselves without the benefit of a lot of infrastructure. And so we're really trying to adapt to that new reality. So on January 12th of 2010 at about 5 p.m., I was definitely changed forever. And this inexplicable tragedy happened, and we learned a couple of really, really important things coming out of it. So one, within 3 hours, we had set up, along with the State Department, the Text Haiti to 90999 campaign. Everybody familiar with that? And through the sheer power of Twitter and Facebook, for the first 48 hours after that, we had no other integrated marketing or PR supporting that campaign, and there were about 2.3 million tweets and retweets, and we had raised about $3 million. So it was a really important moment, not just for the Red Cross, but for all of us in our entire society, sort of coming together around this one issue and taking this easy action, not only retweeting it, but actually taking the action as well, which was a really important realization for me. I thought, oh, so it does work. It does matter that we're building this fabric in this community. And in the middle of all of that, my team does a lot of listening. We're mentioned about 4,000 times a day, average steady state. If goes up exponentially during a disaster. And so between those 2.3 million tweets, we saw several hundred that were tweets from people saying, I'm trapped under the rubble, can you please send help? And in that moment, I really realized that these are, this is not just a talking at tool. This is not, and even it's not even just a two-way or multi-way tool. There's a real power here and a real opportunity for us as organizations to start to embrace and empower communities to help one another. So we did some research because it's honestly scared us a little bit, the expectations that people might have had around us listening to them and taking action on what they had to say on social tools and mobile tools. So you'll see here, we've done this research survey 3 years in a row. This is our most recent data. And mobile apps are now, and social media are now the fourth most popular means of getting access to information during emergencies. And that stat there on the bottom scares me half to death. It's that more than 76% expect help to arrive within 3 hours of posting to a social media site. That's not getting a response on Facebook, that's being there physically. So we're really working hard to catch up with those expectations and to temper them in some cases. And so what we've done is moved into a really utilitarian viewpoint. We know that not every day does mobile fundraising work. You can't just say, hey, everybody text Red Cross to 90999, and I know that, I'd love for you guys to do that if you want to. But it doesn't work every day like that. So what we're trying to do is take a very utilitarian focus. We've started developing apps. So you see this is an example of our first one, the first aid app. Everybody could use this information. We all get cuts and scrapes and bruises and bee stings, and this app will help walk you through what to do in those moments. And there's definitely a donate option on there, but it's not the front and center. It's not the reason that you download this app. You download this app because it's useful to you. Here's the example, the menu of the current apps we have. We're making more all the time, and again, we're just trying to be super useful with these. And so back to that moment where people were using Twitter and Facebook to sort of ask for help, it was a huge shift in how my shop sort of does our work. And since then, we've built what we call a digital operations center with a grant from Dell. It's a room, a physical room within our disaster operations center. So it's a great physical manifestation of our organization's commitment to the social web. We're monitoring thousands and thousands of social conversations around disasters every single day, and especially during big events. And we're able to translate that information that we're getting and put it into the hands of the actual decision makers on the ground and in our disaster operations center, so that it's becoming part of our DNA and part of the decision-making process as we are responding. And on the human side, with my team, what we're doing is really teaching digital volunteers, what we call them, to respond individually to people. You'll see some examples of how we did this during Hurricane Isaac a few weeks ago right here. These are the tools we're using. They're Radian 6 tools. There's lots of them out there, but this is what we're using at this time. So what we're actually doing is empowering anybody who lives anywhere in the world, really, to take a 4-hour shift and help to respond to people. There's thousands and thousands of questions that come in every couple of minutes during a major disaster. And people have questions about where shelters are, where resources are, and many times they're just expressing fear or anxiety about a particular situation. And since the Red Cross mission is to help people, is to provide hope and comfort in people's worst moments, this is another really powerful way that we can sort of create community and allow people to help one another. So this is just a couple of the examples that we have up here of the visualizations that we're always having on the screen in the Digital Operations Center. Happy to talk to anybody afterwards about how we gather all this data and translate it in lots of different ways. Here's another one for hurricane season. And this is our engagement console, and where our digital volunteers are using this tool here to reach out to people individually many hundreds of times during a disaster per day. And I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Wendy. Next up is Aaron Sharinian, who's the Vice President of Communications and Public Relations at the United Nations Foundation. He presented a session at the recent Social Good Summit about the use of digital media in the upcoming US presidential elections. And he's going to be talking to us about the UN's Shot at Life campaign to encourage vaccination. Aaron.
Thank you, Raj, for the introduction, and thank you to Kate and our hosts at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This really, as we're learning and talking today, it's dawning on me that this is capacity building that oftentimes we forget about, and it's so important, as we all know, that digital should be in our DNA when we're talking about development, and this sort of capacity building is helpful, so thank you. Today I'm here to talk a little bit about one case study of one of the campaigns that the UN Foundation supports, and the UN Foundation's mission is to help connect people and ideas and resources to help the UN with big global issues, and that includes all of us, I think every single person in this room. But there's one campaign that is our newest campaign, the Shot at Life campaign, which, as we've heard recently, is helping to address one of the most important development problems that's still out there, and that's that 1 in 5 children today still lack access to vaccines, which is an important, one of the most efficient, and one of the most vital interventions that can help change a child's life and a community. And no secret that we're sitting here that that's something that many people around the world are working hard on helping to advance. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about not so much the technology or what we've learned through the Shot at Life campaign, but the approach to the technology. And at the UN Foundation, we've learned, sometimes the hard way, but always the best way, that at the end of the day, it's the people and not the platforms. And our interaction with online moms, with some extraordinary women who have taught us a lot about how to engage on issues. That's what I'm here to share today with the few minutes that I have with you. So the fact of the people and how to engage with the people to bring value, to add value, as was said by my colleague earlier, to their ecosystem. The UN Foundation audiences include the same thing, the same problem, the great opportunity, or the probertunity, if you will, that we all have. Who are we talking to? Each of our campaigns might have the ability to talk to a target audience, but the problem we've got is that oftentimes it's like we're approaching this great buffet, and more doesn't always mean more unless it's more meaningful with particular target audiences. And the Shot at Life campaign made a decision early on to take a step back, to pause and think about that digital audience member that could have the most effect. And we've learned a lot about the digital power of the voice of the online mom in making impact happen. I'll tell you a story today, 2 stories about 2 different moms. One particular mom came up to me, this is a couple of months ago. I'm in a city called Park City, Utah, at one of the dozens of online mom blogger convenings that we've been a part of. And a mom comes up to me after a presentation, and we're talking to her about vaccines and how she as a blogger can get involved with engaging her constituency to advocate on behalf of vaccines and to get more engaged. And she looks at me right in the eye, as they have a tendency to do, you know, because bloggers are passionate, they're involved, and they have a community. And she looks at me right in the eye and says, "I finally feel credentialed." And that for us in the Shot at Life campaign has been a real lesson, the importance of letting people know that you don't have to be a PhD or an MPH or some other acronym that means very little to people outside the development community to allow them to be credentialed on knowing the stats, the facts, and feeling comfortable about talking about development issues. Moms are the perfect people, as we've learned earlier, to be involved and engaged in the issue because they're going through in their lives and they care about an issue that is so close to the development problem that we're helping to address. I went ahead and we heard some great stats earlier, but I'd like to go ahead and do a quick quiz in the room because I think we all need a quiz, right? And there's fabulous merchandise behind it. I'm here with my colleague Elise, and she has a Shot at Life water bottle that will go to the person that can answer this question. Of online moms today in this country, today, October, whatever this is, how many of them will actually log into Facebook? We hear a lot about the waning and waxing of Facebook. Does anyone know? Throw out a number. There's merchandise involved. Come on. What do you have to lose? Not that impressive, all that would have been it, but it is big. Who knows what the number is? Come on. What percentage? Yeah. I'm going to give it to you. Great. The water bottle goes to the lady, the highest bidder back there. It's 76% today. Thank you. We'll go ahead and log on to Facebook. So not only do the moms care about what's happening because they're close to the issue, but moms are online. So the fact that they're online, the fact that they want to engage, the fact that they have that emotional connection has taught us a lot about what we oftentimes will forget when we're talking about digital engagement with audience. And that's the audience part. It's the connection, not just to have tweets for the sake of tweets, but tweets that will actually make sure to have someone who's motivated for a cause. We engage with those moms in multiple ways, and I think we've heard already in this panel the fact that we cannot deny people one-on-one interaction in an offline setting if we're going to make them into advocates and champions that will stay with us for the long run. And we've learned that by going to moms in places where they are, by showing up, and that doctrine of just show up half the time is what makes for a really engaged, really committed digital influencer and advocate for us. So whether it be going to the brands that matter to some of the moms, going to the convenings that matter to some of the moms, we've had hundreds, if not thousands, of engagements with them where we're able to say to them, because we've come to you, when we ask you to tweet, when we ask you to post, it's more than just us being a brand or a bar of soap or some sort of a consumer tactic because we want your dollar. It's because we've been willing to put a body on a plane and come to you before we get all digital with you for the rest of the year. We get that feedback from the moms all the time. The other feedback that we get from the moms is that we need to engage with them in terms of technology, but we all know some of the tactics that we use, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our a new app that we think is a way to engage with moms in a way that they find useful, as brings value to them. But moms have told us a number of things. The second mom I'd like to tell you about is a mom that came up to me in San Diego, California. Mom comes up to me, again, looks me right in the eye, and says, okay, I want to engage with you on this vaccines thing, but don't just send me a button, don't just send me a banner ad, and don't just tell me that you want me to talk about this piece of the vaccines issue. I am interested in the issue, and I'll tell you how I want to engage. That listening has been so important with us when we're talking about digital engagement with audience, giving people an entire menu of facts, figures, and tools, buttons they can put on their blogs, facts and figures and infographics. But by not telling people this week you must be about this aspect of vaccine delivery or this particular disease. We all have editorial calendars. We all have priorities. But moms have been very specific with us. I engage on this issue because this particular piece matters to me, and that's how I will engage with my audience. The example of the mobile application, I think, is one that we all grapple with. Just because you build an app, it doesn't mean that they will come. But we know that moms, like all of us, if you're a parent or a person who has a young person in your life, you're tracking milestones. And we all know that we have that phone and we're all taking pictures of each other and posting about it. So through a Moments Matter mobile app, we have the ability to say to a mom, you want to track the milestones of your child's life? You want reminders on when you're supposed to go to a doctor, when you're supposed to be seeing these certain milestones happening of the first crawl, the first walk, using solid foods? We'll give you those reminders and make it easy for you. And as you're doing it, you can tell your networks that that should be happening for a child around the world. That should be happening for a child who, because he or she's one of those 1 out of 5, didn't get access to a vaccine and won't make it. And that's a powerful narrative, giving a mom something useful for them in their life so they can do something useful for your advocacy agenda. But it has to be about value add for each of them. Some of this functionality we'll share with you later on, but again, the idea of letting people put their signature onto something that's your campaign, relinquishing a little bit of that brand power that you've invested so much in so that they feel connected to your cause. One of the best examples that we had in this engagement with moms at the Shot at Life campaign over the last few years has been something that we called Blogist. And I'm not going to spare you the 2-minute video. I'm going to make you watch it because you need to see this video. But Blogist was our way of saying to online moms, champions for this issue, we want to talk to you so that you can celebrate each other as an ecosystem and thereby bring the vaccines issue into a way where we're not asking you to jump platforms, but we're coming to you. So let's cue the video if we can. wraps up so many lessons learned. I'm going to share with you just a couple before I close out. The first one was go to where the moms are talking and be a part of their ecosystem. So invite them to share about each other and the influence that they have had on one another's lives. The lesson that we got back from them was that don't underestimate how deep we want to get on your issue. Because the moms came to us and they were voracious with questions, and they wanted to go very deep on the vaccines issue in very different ways. They started conversations about photography or whatever they blog about, but they continued the conversation and ended with comments, and many of whom said the second lesson, which was important, sometimes we just don't get substantive comments, but through a leveraged gift, and we knew it was a leveraged gift, in this way, you prompted my community to engage with me, and I started meeting people that I didn't know. Value add to their ecosystem. Viewers, commenters, readers that never had come out yet to say to them, I care about health. But the leveraged gift, the incentivized gift, which we were very fortunate to have, allowed us to create the momentum where those people came through. The Bloggist experience has reaffirmed for us that by treating a target audience not as just a target, but as an audience and as people, that we're going to be able to build those advocates for issues that matter around the world. We're grateful for the chance that we have to learn from you, the fact that the chance that we've had to learn from so many of these moms, because at the end of the day, we know that we can be tweeting about and using as many megabytes as we want, but it's really about the person and not the platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Waiting very patiently on the end there is David Kobia from Ushahidi. He's their Director of Technology Development and their co-founder. They develop, as I mentioned earlier, open source software that helps you gather and present data. David has been very active in the area of digital disaster relief, but today I think he's going to give us more of an overview of what Ushahidi does, I think. David.
Patiently waiting, finally made it. It's definitely an honor to be here amongst brilliant people. Hopefully we'll learn quite a few things, share quite a few things together. But my name is David Kobia. I'm a co-founder and Director of Technology at Ushahidi. So Ushahidi is basically a nonprofit technology company that builds free and open source tools that help people with democratization of information, right? Ushahidi is essentially creating tools that enable people to tell their own version of stories. And it just turns out that maps are a really compelling way to tell stories, right? So as for where we came from, we were actually formed out of post-election violence in Kenya in 2008. You have a beleaguered government, when things go south, decide that the best thing to do is to shut down all the mainstream media, right? Which is newspapers, TV, radio, the usual suspects, and neglect the one thing that everyone else is really on, which is on mobile phones. And people forget that, you have almost a population of, with 500 million people in Africa with cell phones. They have really powerful devices on their hip, right? So these are people who are sharing these stories, and we started to see these start to pop up on our blogs. So we're all bloggers, and we come together and we build a platform, and we say, let's aggregate all these stories that seem to be popping up, stories of violence and police brutality that just keep popping up all over the country, into a single platform. And that's what became Ushahidi. And a famous philosopher called Eric Hersman once said, if it works in Africa, it works anywhere. We just like to say that because generally in Africa, there are quite a few, the many challenges that we deal with, right? But overcoming those challenges, I feel we can address many of the problems around the world, especially with regard to a disaster and crisis response. So after building this platform, which is mostly mobile-driven, and it's free and open source, as I said before, we've actually pushed out over 20,000 deployments around the world. So over 20,000 deployments of Ushahidi deployed around the world in over 30 languages, in over 100 countries. So what is the platform itself? It is mostly mapping, as I said. It's very mobile-driven, so we're building mobile tools, using text messaging, social media tools, Twitters and Facebook and whatnot. And that's what the Ushahidi platform is. It allows you to get something going to aggregate all this information as quickly as possible, right? But In between there, you see something called Swift River. What we realized was, while everyone is tweeting and texting and doing all this good stuff, it does become overwhelming. So we've been building something called Swift River, and it's an analogy for a swift river of information that is flowing, and you're trying to sift through it to look for the really useful nuggets of information. And I'm sure some of this will come up in the panel after this, which we'll be happy to talk about. So as I said before, a lot of mobile tools. Key to everything, of course, is translating. It's more than just English, which we realized, right? So having all these things available for other people around the world. And as I said before, we have this in over 30 languages. So just to highlight some of the uses of Ushahidi that have been happening around the world. Ushahidi has been used for election monitoring. It was used in India and used in Kenya in a recent referendum to track voter fraud, hate speech, vote counting issues, that sort of thing, right? Ushahidi has been used for citizen journalism, which is what essentially the platform is. A pretty good example is HarassMap in Egypt. And HarassMap has been bringing awareness to sexual harassment in Egypt. But with each of these examples, there has been a significant amount of learning because different people use tools in different ways. With HarassMap, for instance, you're dealing with issues of security because people are a little naive about sharing on social media. But you had governments there who are really aware of this. In 2008, that was a different time from 2012, where now you have people, and especially some of these questionable governments, really aware that people are out there sharing this information naively, right? So like with HarassMap, for instance, you had the government come in and actually look for people. And again, one of the big things with social media today is that anonymity is becoming really expensive. It's something that almost doesn't exist in this day and age, which makes it really difficult to share, right? We had the oil spill crisis map, which is closer to home, which most of you are aware of. And this tracked the impact of the oil spill to communities around the Gulf of Mexico. We're talking about the fishermen and people who have businesses around there and how this is really impacting, the ecology as well. But the biggest uses of Ushahidi to date have been with, again, like real crisis and disaster, which it doesn't get bigger than Haiti or in Japan to some extent. And again, as I said before, there's a difference in how people are interacting with technology. Because on one hand, you had Haiti where people are really sending text messages, right? Us working with with the telcos in Haiti and aggregating over 45,000 text messages into our system had its own challenges, right? Because when you start getting messages in Creole, and we're sitting here, English speakers, and you start looking at these messages and you say, oh, I think we created another problem, because now we need to find people who understand Creole to translate these messages so that they can then be mapped and sent off to first responders like the Red Cross, right? So there's that challenge. And then on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, you have Japan, which is really advanced. They're more into using apps and using regular social media, not just text messaging, right? So it's how do we pull all this stuff into one place and deal with all these different challenges of how people are interacting with digital media, right? Ushahidi has been used for multiple social revolutions. Again, this is one of those areas where people feel really inspired to, contribute to social media because everyone wants to say something, right? The Arab Spring, in Egypt, in Libya and Tunisia, and now there's the crisis unfolding in Syria. All those, again, pose different challenges. You can't apply the same template for social media across the world, right? And of course, closer to home again is the Occupy Wall Street. Occupy map really is all the Occupy protests going on around the country. And we can't forget citizen journalism interaction with mainstream media, because they are dealing with, the same challenges, and I think they have way more experience. So I think for us, it has been quite a pleasure to work with people who have been established in this space for some time. The BBCs, the Guardians, worked quite a bit with Al Jazeera. They are struggling to deal with, how do we deal with this social media flood of information, right? Breaking news stories. So you almost can't not work with them. When you start dealing with issues of how do you verify information coming out of the field, right? And as Aaron alluded to just before this, it is more than just the platform. Building apps it's cool, apps are cool, but really if you're going into a real crowdsourcing effort, it's more about the people, right? So when you're working with people, you start to think about how do we deal with outreach? If you build it, doesn't mean they'll come. More than likely they won't come, right? So, and in each use case, it's a different challenge for, how do we deal with outreach and getting to the people that are affected? How do we close this loop between the people who are affected and the people who are responding to it, right? So it takes some skill on every level to get this done. And, that actually brings me to the Standby Task Force. This is not really an organization. It's an ad hoc group of people around the world, because we figure that with each deployment of Ushahidi, it's bigger than us, so it's getting everyone involved so we don't have to repeat the process of teaching people how to do something as simple as geotagging. How do I put this in the right place? What kind of skill does it take to map something correctly so that people can respond to it and it becomes an actionable piece of data? So again, it's not really an organization, it's just an ad hoc group of people who are available on a whim, and this is across the globe to help with especially mapping efforts, because again, response means you need to know about things like location, which is critical, especially with regard to crisis and disaster response. So that's the team, and as always, at Ushahidi we are looking for translators, mappers, and testers, and developers, and whatnot, and thank you.
David, thank you very much. Thank you to all our case study presenters. Some really interesting themes, I think, that came out there. We're going to be talking more about those themes with our panel a little later on this morning, but I want to open it up now. Oh, let me first tell you, actually, we must be doing something right. I've just been told that more than 200 people are actually watching the webcast as we're working today, so that's excellent. 800. More than 800. Wow, increasing exponentially. It's Moore's law for you right there. So let me open this up to questions now from all of you. Do we have a roving mic? I think we have a mic. Yep, there we are. Karen at the back has a roving mic. So put your hand up and we'll get the mic to you. Who'd like to go first with a question? No one? Lady over here, Helena, I think her name is, yeah. If you could just stand up and introduce yourself and then ask a question. We'll ask our panelists to address this.
My name is Helena Chan and I'm with the Gavi Alliance. My question is for Aaron. When he talked about a leverage gift for the mommy bloggers, I was wondering if you could actually elaborate on that and talk about the strategy and the idea behind that and what it meant.
There are a number of approaches to this, and I think there's some examples in our community where it's gone really well and maybe not. In the case of Blogist, I'm going to do a rough estimate and say 11,349. Am I right? Comments came through. Is that right? Good. I can keep my job for the next couple of minutes. Came through as part of the incentive. And the incentive was for every comment that's made about this post related to celebrating the moms and the fact that these moms are engaged in the vaccines issue was going to trigger that gift as part of the Shot at Life campaign, and that $20 that's allowing us to help get access to vaccines for children around the world. The fact that what we learned was that it's so important when you're engaging with an audience to have the rules very clear at the beginning and the expectations very clear from the beginning, and that you have those bookmarks of a timeline. And the moms who helped us build Blogist made that clear as well, that moms didn't want something that was just, that could be going ad hoc for a long period of time. They wanted to make sure that there was a goal, they wanted to make sure that there was a timeline, and that it was clear that the gift, the incentivized comment, was going to trigger something that could be measured. That it wasn't just going to be a dollar amount that was a willy-nilly dollar amount because of the person who was putting up the money, but that it was something that could actually fund an intervention. I think we all know that because we've all tried to break down our interventions as how much does it cost for me to do what I need to do. But in the case of Blogist, we got a firm reminder from the online voices that we work with, these online these extraordinary online women, we've learned from them to say, make sure that it's keying up a gift that's about a real intervention. The other thing that we found was that the practicality of a gift and the practical nature of what some of the interventions are that we support was something that really incentivized the comments. And a lot of the comments that we saw said, in a time where economic times are rough, no one has cash, we're interested to know that these are cost effective, that this is about helping our aid dollars go further. And that was something that we learned through the process.
Okay, Bree.
Hi, I'm Jen Hausman. I'm from the Gates Foundation, and I was just noticing on Twitter your comment about moving beyond retweets into meaningful action has gotten a ton of pickup. I think that really resonated with people. My question for the panel is, do you all consider awareness raising to be a meaningful action?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I'm sure everybody has stuff to add on. I think when it comes to advocacy, there's a big story to be told there. To say that the American public is caring about this faraway issue is really powerful in a lot of different ways. So that's certainly something that we leverage when it comes to telling an advocacy or a story to influencers on the Hill.
And I'll just jump in that I think it might depend on where each of our respective, and in the room, our respective communities are. So for us, awareness raising is a huge end goal because there's very little awareness about global nutrition where we are today within the public and within policymakers. I think if hopefully 5 years from now, our end goal will not be awareness raising because we will have gotten there, and then our actions become something a bit different. But where we are in this very early stage, we are looking for going beyond retweets. Great quote, but we do also want to amplify the conversation.
One thing that I've seen is it's great when the retweets are specifically targeted to a member. I mean, we all know that we do this. We all have this as part of our daily bread here. And at the Shot at Life campaign in Atlanta, seeing parents tweet at their congressman, and they're two senators from both parties, that was a powerful moment to say, okay, so the technology itself, Twitter might not be perfect in terms of a tool, but there are moments when you can use it and you can be very, very direct with it. This idea about moving beyond and allowing for people to move beyond what they're doing, I'm excited by what I saw happen at the Social Good Summit, where some people were actually taking targeted video messaging and targeted analysis and using Twitter as a way to get that in front of their policymakers, whether it was in Africa or in Asia. And I think that's what we're all grappling with right now, and I think that's the next thing we've got to get to.
Just to add on to what Aaron is talking about, I think it's critical to amplify it. On the internet, there's the famous 1-9-90 rule, which is basically 1% of the people are creating, 9% are curating, 90% are consumers, right? So amplifying helps change that ratio because we want more people creating than actually consuming, right?
Before we go to the next question, I'm just going to play devil's advocate on the point there a little bit. I'm interested to know from all of you, if you're all working hard to increase awareness of all your issues, how then do you combat the inevitable compassion fatigue that people are going to face? I mean, if you're all on using these digital tools, people are going to be totally bombarded by all of this. How do you stand out? Or do you just have to accept that a lot of people are just going to get turned off?
Probably already are bombarded. I don't think they're about to be. We probably have bombarded them. I mean, my personal view on this is that, and it was said in the introductory remarks, is that we have to connect, in particular when we're talking about global issues, connect to people's passions and make these issues personal. And I don't think every issue is personal for every person in the same way. So what we find ourselves doing is sort of weeding through and trying to find that community, however small it might be, for which nutrition is a personal issue. And that might not be the same person for which malaria is a personal issue, or for which the Global Poverty Project and sort of understanding the issues around poverty is a personal issue. Some of that might be overlap, and I think that's great. But there are people that have passions and interests, and we're trying to find that community. I don't know if others have different opinions.
For us, it's sort of about tapping into this idea that you touched on, Erin, which is giving up control, right? Letting the people, finding those communities that really do care about the issues that you're working on, and then letting them have the power to leverage them in whatever way they see fit has been the most rewarding for us.
I think the watch this space issue, to your question, is the gamification question, because people are approaching it in 2 different ways, 3 different ways. It's very exciting. The Half the Sky game is going to be very cool, and a lot of those people will have been on that platform. The gamification that was mentioned here for people who say, look, maybe I'm a latent supporter of global issues, I didn't know it, but I really wanted Lady Gaga tickets, and I'm okay with those 2 things. I think our space is going to have to grapple with some tricky questions here. And we, at the UN Foundation, small commercial break, we just launched the Global Good Challenge, which is our way of trying to take this to the next step, by saying to people, is it too much noise because we're talking to ourselves? Is the digitally, globally connected person someone that's hearing too much from us? Or who should be in that pie that's not in there yet? And who can we be bringing in who doesn't see a conflict between it gets me something and it's good for the world?
Oh, please.
To the compassion fatigue question, though, I always find it's about putting out those stories that allow you to change it from that compassion fatigue and sort of, oh, we must feel sorry for these kids, allowing them to have those stories in that space that they can use to start changing it and start talking about the progress and the success and talk about the stories they want to talk about. It's finding the audience and letting them have those stories to talk about.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the same vein, something we talk about a lot is, in this amplification, you have a bunch of prospects who have a general sense of your cause, but how do you convert them into partners? And I think opening that up for different points of engagement is really how you transition them into active supporters.
I think both of your case studies showed that you had campaigns that invited people to take part in a challenge and gave them ownership of the problem and also ownership of the solution. And that seemed very interesting to me. Okay, more questions. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Bree, and I work for Save the Children UK in London. I just wanted to say one thing on the compassion fatigue. I think that one of the ways you can combat it is by ensuring that the actions you ask people to do lead to a win or some kind of impact. So we've done a lot of stuff around tweeting around Prime Minister's questions and then getting our question asked. So with the right timing, people get immediate results, and it's a really empowering experience for them. My question is for the Red Cross and Ushahidi around both the special task force and the volunteers. I find that to be a fascinating thing where you have people coming forward to fill this problem that you could be unexpected. But my question is around, how did that develop? Was it organic? Did you decide to launch this problem to fill a gap? Did people get interested? And what's the upkeep required? Thanks.
For us, it started, like I said, the number of mentions of the Red Cross grows exponentially when there's been a major disaster. So, for example, in the days after the Japan and earthquake and tsunami, we were seeing about 150,000 mentions a day. And that's too many. We have a 3-person team. So it's too many for us to read. And there's just, what we're trying to do is make sure that we know that the Red Cross can't be every single place where people are in need. So what we want to do is train as many people as possible to help others in their community or even others across the world using these tools effectively. So we developed this digital volunteer. It's still very nascent. We're taking baby steps, right? And the goal, though, is to really expand the mission of the Red Cross, not necessarily the name of the Red Cross, but having lots and lots of individuals with the skills and power to help their community. It's a lot of training, though. It's an undertaking, for sure.
I think for us, it came out of the fact that we were genuinely overwhelmed. And I think Haiti was at that point, we said, it's impossible for one organization to do this, right? Like I talked about in the presentation, we had to reel in the Haitian diaspora to translate messages from Creole to English, right? And then you start talking to other networks. So there are other established networks, like there's the Crisis Mappers network, for instance, right? So it's reaching out to all these different groups and saying, we actually need help. We need to move a little faster, right? We're overwhelmed with the amount of information coming into our systems, right? And we don't need this to happen again. And we need to keep talking about this. So it's very organic. It goes from talking about it to doing things like actually training people to do simple things like mapping, right? And then you start to see this ad hoc organization, not organization, but platform start to grow. I use that carefully because it's not an organization. So it is very organic, yes.
Who's next? Who wants to ask another question?
Local organization here in Seattle, Building Changes. We're working to address the issue of homelessness here in Washington State. And we're just beginning to think about our social media strategy. Our audiences, who are comprised of our grantees and our public policy advocates and allies and private philanthropy, want different things from us, and they want us to add value in different ways. And some of our grantees would like us to play that role of curating for them. They're on the ground, they're doing the work, they're trying to change the systems within their communities. They don't have time to be scanning the environment to find out what the innovations are, what they should be learning. And so I'm interested in basically from anybody on the panel, what kind of baseline percentage should we be looking at in terms of how much we curate, how much we take our learnings, our evaluations, and get that out to our audiences, but then how much should we be scanning the environment so that we're offering them the best ideas, because that's what they want. They want us to be the hub and shove these ideas out to them. But it's, we have a limited staff as well. So I'm interested in anything that you might have to offer about that.
Who'd like to have a go at that question?
I think a good starting point is just listening to what your audience is craving, and where are you going to be able to pull that content? Is it from you curating it yourself, or is it working through partners to bring that content to the forefront? But it's a lot of testing. It's a lot of listening on our social media platforms. We're constantly putting different campaigns out there, and often are surprised by what people are actually absorbing, what they're what's interesting, what's driving some sort of conversation. And I think having a willingness to really analyze that, and when it's a surprise and you thought this one campaign was going to do so well and you're kind of bummed about it, you have to recognize that that means a shift to something else. So I think really just listening and looking at some of the consumer or supporter engagement for the content that you push out there starts to drive where you go.
Definitely that try, analyze, adapt model, isn't it? You put something out there, see if it works. If it doesn't work, accept it doesn't work that way. Look at a different way of doing it. If it does work, hey, keep going on that.
We dealt with this issue before the Millennium Development Goals Summit 2 years ago. A huge amount of content. Who's going to curate all this when it's, all of a sudden we become people, the malaria people, the water people, the children's health people, and all of this was happening, and how do you curate all of that? And when it's so daunting, I think it's the beauty of the Julian calendar that gives you the ability to say, we're going to go by themes, by week, and let people allow you to be the curator by the calendar and take whatever issue it is about homelessness that you're dealing with on the systems level. I know that's part of your focus, but to say we're going to talk about policies on homelessness here, interventions that are happening, and just to take the calendar and allow that to be your first curation point, because otherwise you're going to drown in the amount of their expectations and the content that's there. Sometimes you just got to use the calendar.
I think enjoy the chaos, right? It's beautiful. Well, for us, this isn't exactly addressing your question, but we're very focused on the client side and actually executing our mission using social and mobile tools, and hopefully showing that as an example to our donors and other stakeholders that we're doing it right, that we're getting ready to be continuing to be relevant in the 21st century. And so when I can tell a story of how I talked a babysitter going through a tornado warning, through taking all the right actions in that moment of danger, just via Twitter, then it becomes sort of an inspiring story to show other people how we might begin to use these tools to help others. And also it actually did help, one person.
Okay, next question, Jeremy.
Jeremy Hillman from the foundation. Sort of picking up a little on this idea of sort of resources, and no one has the luxury of having sort of hugely resourced digital social media teams. What are the ideal sort of skills and talents that we should be recruiting for in this area? It seems there's so much detail is needed in terms of how do you design the best app, the insights that you need to really understand the audience and the research that goes into that. It seems that digital and social media people need to be everything. And you know, what do you really look for, and what do you sort of on the panel sort of think about the skills in your teams?
Who'd like to start? Adriana? Adriana, you look like you're about to say something.
That's a really good question.
Have a go at answering it.
You know, for us, we've taken because we are, as all on the panel I think are, and probably everybody in the room, we're a very small team. And we've taken an approach of trying to find very specific niche outside partners who can help us make this happen, which has some benefits and some challenges. So the benefits are you're working with sort of best in class within that one area. Challenge is keeping everybody coordinated and sort of on the same team and understanding the big picture vision of what's happening here beyond just that one piece that they're working on, which becomes your job as my job as the manager of the whole project. But we've actually just started to bring some of it in-house and starting to build that capacity up in-house, which is exciting for us. And I think what we looked for specifically on the social side was, you know, someone who really had, I guess, two things. One was real competence and understanding of managing these streams day to day. And that's what they love to do. They wanted to be in there with the community every day because that's what this requires. And the other piece was an interest and ability into actually, to Aaron's point, use that calendar and be able to pull together the content for a calendar approach to what we're going to talk about. And not everybody is that person. There are a lot of people who are really strategy people and can come up with the great campaign ideas, but being in there and working with the community every day is not their thing, and that's not who you want to hire. So, I mean, it took us a little while to find that person, but it's working out. It's great. So that's where we are in the very early stages.
I guess it's a question of what you want to do yourself and what you want to outsource is, if you're okay to use external monitoring things, there are various things that monitor your reach, your whatever. But what you want is some way to get all of that content going and get all those conversations going. Hire a chatterbox. We had a person who loved to talk. And so we said, okay, sit on the social media and talk to those people. And you got conversations going. And it grew our basis. So I guess, yeah, it's a question of what do you want to do yourself? What do you want to let other people do?
How important is it to make sure that if you've got this chatterbox working for you, that they're on message? I mean, someone else was talking about the importance of letting people just decide what they want to talk about, as long as you're sort of within the ballpark.
That's the benefit of them being a staffer. They're on staff. They need to, in a way, be led for what they're talking about by what the audience wants to talk about, but they are your staff member. They will talk on what you're paying them to talk about. Keep on your message.
I don't know, I think you want an element of fearlessness in that person too, though.
Just to add on exactly what they're saying, I think one of the most important people in our organization is a community builder, right? Because the only way we're going to accomplish anything is if multiple people are talking. We can't obviously solve this problem ourselves. We have to connect the policymakers and the technologists and the community. And you need a great community builder to make that happen. Because otherwise, I think a lot of things get lost in translation, especially in this day and age when there's a disconnect between policymakers and some of these new technologies that are bubbling up, right? It is critical to keep that conversation going. So community builder is pretty important.
I want to brag to the person to my right because I think your organization has given all of us an example on sometimes it's not going to be perfect, and you have to be human about it because we're all communications people, and I think we're all communications people, even if that's not your day job. The days of pitch perfect 24/7 are dead if you're actually going to be doing it right on social. So there's going to be a moment when something's going to go wrong. You have to be ready for it. You have to be human. Again, the American Red Cross wrote the book for us the last 2 years on ways to actually build following and build loyalty because you were just open about it. I'll tell you, I'm going to give away an interview question that I do in my job right now. I don't know why, but I'm going to give it away if I ever interview with any of the 800 people on the live stream or any of you, is it drives me crazy when I'm talking to somebody and I'll say to them, who's doing something that you admire that's not in this space online? And when they can't give me a 360 answer, I know that person's not going to be my team. And the team I have, which I think is the best team in the biz, and I love them, they were all able to answer that question to me, which is not in the international development space, but maybe in the advocacy space in something else, or for a consumer product. Here's something that a brand's doing that I really like. We should emulate that. That 360 approach for me is great. Otherwise, you can start believing your own stream. You only watch your own posts, and those likes really start mattering to only you. You've got to be aware about what's going on.
Who else has a question? Lady over there. Can we get a mic to you?
B. Wathridge with Landesa, and my question is about Ushahidi and how you target or don't specifically policymakers in Africa, and what's the nature of their involvement and the influence that the platform has on them.
It is really difficult to target policymakers in Africa, especially because this is kind of a threatening new thing, right? It's unsettling because a lot of people really don't understand how it works. In some countries, like in Kenya, where I'm from, they actually are making an effort to do things like opening up data. Like they have data.gov here. There's a similar thing in Kenya. So they are getting involved by opening up these streams of data so that people can interact with them, right? And those are it's a low-hanging fruit for people to start talking with government and policymakers and people to start to feel like they can exercise some kind of civic, duty in a way. But I think it's really tough in Africa. I don't know if that answers your question.
Do you have another question from someone? Yes, gentleman at the back.
Michael Silberman with the Digital Mobilization Lab at Greenpeace. I feel like we have a bunch of great examples from all of you and everyone, and probably others in the room, of how we can use new media to reach new audiences. A lot of creative ways we heard about engaging people that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have been engaging in your mission and in dialogue, and basically breadth. And at the same time, we also had a couple examples with Ushahidi and with the Red Cross of some new ways of using digital media to to expand mission. I think you said it well. So not just expand name and reach, but to expand the mission. I'm curious, what other examples are you all looking at, or have you already explored, for how you can leverage the potential kind of power and skills and people that you're now connecting with to take on roles that previously you would never have been able to fill because it would have meant hiring more staff? And I think the Red Cross, both of your examples have people doing real work that would have otherwise required expertise in-house in a previous era.
Well, I think the next thing, what I'm sort of figuring out is that the digital volunteer role that we've created actually does require a bit of work and training to get involved in. And so what we're also trying to do is develop something that's much easier to be involved with. And I don't know what we'll call it yet, digital advocates maybe. And just really delineating the small 5-minute actions that anyone can take during the course of their day online to help make a difference in the organization. And we're really trying hard to figure out what are very valuable action items that people can take on a day-to-day basis. And in that, we've never been able to do that before without training and without, vetting a person and really trusting them to say the exact right thing. So this is all just a process of sort of letting go of that being perfect. And I think, we'll end up more efficient and more perfect the more we let go.
I think we may have time for about one more question. Let me just ask Robin, is anything coming off Twitter? Any interesting questions coming off Twitter? Or are they just basking in our general greatness? Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that for maybe the next panel. One more question from somebody? Anyone got one more point to make? Don't be shy. This is your last, well, it's not your last chance, but it's your last chance before you get a cup of coffee. No more questions? Okay, well then, think we should probably just call this session to a close. Let me thank all our guests. Let's go through them again. Michelle Keith at the end there, Guy Kirkpatrick, Adriana Legalbo, Wendy Harmon, Aaron Sharinian, and David Kobir. Thank you very much for your insights and your case studies.